Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi Shir.
Shalom, welcome back. Today's daf is YOMA Zayin. We begin 5 lines from the top of the Amid. We're in the midst of a discussion regarding an apparent contradiction between Meseches Tamid and Meseches Midas regarding the exact location of Lishkas Hatzloim, which was this chamber in which they kept the pre-inspected behemoths in preparation for the Korban Tamid. Where was this Lishka? The Mishnah Meseches Tamid describes it as follows. It was in the Marav Tzafin corner of Lishkas Beis HaMoiked, which was this large-sized room, an unroofed area, which had 4 lishkas, 4 rooms situated, one in each corner. In the Marav Tzafin corner, there was a lishka which contained the tlaim, the lambs, the animals. Now it's called Lishkas Atlaim. That's the Mishnah Meseches Tamid. We have another Mishnah Meseches Midas, which places the Lishkas Atlaim in a different corner. That Mishnah maintains it was in the Marav Durham corner of Lishkas Beis HaMoiked. So where was it? Marav Durham or Marav Tzafin? Says the Gemara 5 lines from the top, Amar Huna Mantana Midas, Rabbi Yehuda ben Yaakov. The Mishnah Midas reflects Shitas Rabbi Yehuda ben Yaakov. He was the author of Meseches Midas. He maintains Lishkas Atlaim was in that corner, whereas the other Tana, Meseches Tamid, maintains it was in the other corner. What do we find? That Rabbi Yehuda ben Yaakov is the author of Midas. This non, we have another Mishnah Meseches Midas, which says as follows: Ezras Noshim. This was the first area that you encountered when you entered the Beis HaMikdash. The Chatzar, this big unroofed area called Ezras Nashim, which was actually square. Ezras Nashim hoisa oirech mea ushleishim machamish. Its length means east to west. It was 135 amma. Al reichav mea ushleishim machamish, as well as its width, going north south, was 135 amma. So it was a square area, 135 by 135. Va'arba lishkes hayu bedalad miktzosea, and there were 4 rooms, one in each corner of this Ezras Nash. Umahoy Mishamshis. What function did they perform? Draimis Mizrachis, the one in the Dara Mizrach corner, he also Lishkas Hanazirim, that was considered Lishkas Hanazirim. Shesham Nazirim Mevashklam Eshlameim, that's where the Nazirim would go in and cook up their Karbanei Shlamim at the end of their Nazir's period. Umegalchens Aron, that's where they would shear their hair off. Umeshalchen Tachas Adud, and toss the hair into the fire underneath the dud, the pot, which contained the cooking shlamim meat. So Dar Mizrach was designated for the Nazirim. Mizrach is Tzfainis, the one in the other corner, Mizrach Tzafin. He hoists a lishkas dira eitzim. That was the firewood storage room. Shesham kahanim bali mumin, oimdin umaslin be'eitzim. That's where the kehanim who had a mum could not do the avodah. They performed other functions in Beis HaMikdash. They would go there, they would check the firewood for any worms. Because a piece of wood which contained a worm is considered like a balmum and is unfit for mizbeach. So that was Mizrach Tzafin. Tzfainis Marabs, the room situated in that corner, he used to Lishkas HaMetzorayim. It was called Lishkas HaMetzorayim. Now Rashi brings the Gemara later on. That's where they had a mikveh for the Metzorah, who arrives on his 8th day after he already became tahar, but now he needs an additional tahara. He comes in, gets a tefillah, and is available to extend his hand into the azora so that they can put the dam on him. And this was the lishka reserved for them for their purpose. Maravis Draimis, the Marav Durham room, what was that for? Omar Rabbi Yehuda ben Yaakov, shachachti, actually forgot. What it used to serve, what function it performed. The fact that Rabbi Yehuda ben Yaakov is excusing himself, well, I forgot, apparently he is the one speaking. He's the man Amar of this Mishnah, which was a Mishnah Meseches Midas. Apparently, Meseches Midas was authored by Rabbi Yehuda ben Yaakov, and that answers the steer we had between Meseches Tamid, which is one man Amar, Meseches Midas, which is a different man Amar, actually Rabbi Yehuda ben Yaakov. Abba Shol Omer, he says, no, I'll tell you exactly what that room is used for. the Marav's Droimus room, Rabbi Lezer says he forgot, that's where they stored wine and oil, presumably for the Nesachim. So that was the shimush of that room. The Nikres Lishkas Beis Shemnaya. They used to call it the Lishkas Beis Shemnaya, the room where they stored oil. In any case, Mesechas Midos is a Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov. Hachinam Mistavra. I'll actually prove it from another source, that Midos is the Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov that was authored by Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov. This not. Let's take a look at another Mishnah in Mesechas Midos. Kolak Solam Shahayu Sham. All walls that were present, that were built in the Harabayis area, Hayu Gvayim, they were very, very high, very tall. Rashi will tell us they actually accommodated a very large opening. Your typical Pesach was 20 amas high. So the walls were even higher than that. So you had enough for the Pesach 20 amas plus some wall material on top. So the walls were very high, except for one wall which was a midget wall, a short wall. Except for the easternmost wall of the Harabayis, which, although it had a Pesach of 20 amas in height, but the wall material above the Pesach needed to be cut down. It couldn't really rise too high. Why? Because the kohen who would tend to the paraduma over on Har Hazeisim, next mountain, Pasuk says that the kohen will do haza'ah v'hiza el noichach pnei oyel moed. Although he's standing over in Har Mishkan, Har Hazeisim, he's going to be facing west and do the haza'ah towards the Mikdash, but not only towards the Mikdash, specifically towards the Pesach of the Oyel Moed. Oyel Moed is referring to the Heichal. So you actually see, he has to have direct vision, unobstructed line of vision from where he's standing to the Pesach HaHeichal, to the eastern side of the Heichal, the entranceway to the Heichal, and that's how he does his Hazah. And that was the halacha. If that's the case, then we have to figure out a way that he can see the Heichal. And in order to enable that, says the Mishnah, you had to keep things low. The wall, the first wall which he will face, meaning the easternmost wall of the Harabayis, cannot have lots of wall material above that Pesach, because he has to look over that wall in order to see, in order to observe the Pesach of Oyel Moed. Let's take a look at Rashi first. Rashi would be around 14 lines from the top, beginning with the words Hachinami Mistavra. I'll prove to you that your typical Mishnah in Midas is following Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov. The stam of the Midas, Rabbi Lezer Ka'amala. Why? This not Kolak Solam. And the Mishnah goes on to say that the Mizrach wall of the Harabayis needed to be lower in height than the rest of the walls, to enable the kohen to see, to have an unobstructed view all the way to the Heichal. Apparently that's only Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov who would require that, as we're going to see. This not. Kolak Solam, says Rashi, v'lei motzas mukmas el Lezer ben Yaakov. This statement only conforms with Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov. According to him, there would be obstruction, if not for the fact that you would lower that wall. Kolak Solam shal yisham, b'chol binyan harabayis, hayigvoyin harber. The walls were very high, very tall. Harber moed, asher hayu kol psachim shebehen, gvoyin chafama. They were so tall they accommodated a very tall Pesach of 20 amas in height. Levad b'mashal psachim harber moed. So you had a Pesach of 20 in addition to the wall material situated above the entranceway. So we're dealing with very, very tall walls, except for one. Chutz mikoisel mizrachis. Hu hatachtoin l'ragli harabayis. So harabayis actually went on a slant. It started low, and then it gradually rose in an incline. So at the eastern side, it was lower down, and then the ground level gradually rose as you proceeded westward. Says Rashi, the easternmost wall of the Harabayis, l'ragli Harabayis, on the lower portion of the Harabayis, that couldn't be too tall. It couldn't be too high. That one, sheboy nichnasen l'chel, through which you go to the chel, which is the area beyond the Har Bayis wall, Shelfnei Ezras Nashim, which precedes the Ezras Nashim area, which we already described earlier. Umenacher nechnosen Ezras Nashim. Ezras Nashim, from there you proceed La Zora Agdola, which had Ezras Yisrael, Ezras Kahanim, which had the Mizbeach, and then you proceed to the Ulam, to the Heichal, and Kodesh HaKadoshim. So speaking about the easternmost wall, that had to be shortened. Shekai and Asoyer v'Sapora Oymid Baramishcha, Hu Harazesim, Ashapnei Yerushalayim Mikedem, Upnei HaKohen Lamar, because the Kohen would stand on Harazesim, which was Mizrach to Yerushalayim, and he would face the Har Bayis, the Beis HaMikdash, towards his west. Umeskaven v'roya, Me'al Goiva Rosh HaKosel. He had to peer over that short wall in order to make direct contact with the Pesach Heichel. Derech HaSha'orim Shelfnei Mimenu Pesach Shel Heichel K'shumaz B'dam K'dechsiv, as the pasuk requires it. V'hiza El Noichach Pnei El Moed V'Gomer. So you have to peer over that wall and then look through the gateways, the entranceways which are lined up. There were several entranceways into the Ezras Nashim, from there into the Ezras Yisrael, from there to the Heichel. They were all lined up. And he was able to peer above that outer wall and look through those entranceways, through those sha'arim, until he noticed the Pesach Shel Heichel far away. Why did that first wall have to be low? V'im hoisa ha'kosel gavai, if it would have been a tall wall. Even though the sha'arim were lined up, one behind the other, it wouldn't help him. He still couldn't see through to the Pesach HaHeichel. His vision would be blocked. All these sha'arim were lined up. So technically, once you look through one, you can see through all of them until you get to the Heichel. Shar HaBayis was connected Shar Ezras Nashim. Shar Ezras Nashim was connected Shar HaZorah Agdola. Shar HaZorah was connected Pesach HaHeichel. So technically, if he looks through the Shar in the Mizrach wall of the Har Bayis, he can look straight through to the Shar Ezras Nashim, to the Shar HaZorah, to the Shar Pesach HaHeichel, but he couldn't do it. His vision was blocked. Lo yochel liros es Pesach HaHeichel derech Pesachim. Why? Because, as we mentioned, the Har Bayis would gradually rise from the lower eastern part all the way up to the Marav. Achekarka Pesach HaHeichel gavoya chaf. Some say chaf beis ames yoser mekarke ragle Har Bayis. It would rise gradually until when you get to the Heichal, you've already risen 22 ames above the Har Bayis level. So you're out of sight. He no longer will notice the Heichal when he's looking through the Pesach Har Bayis, which is merely 20 ames high. The threshold of the Heichel's entranceway is situated on a higher level than the upper point of the Pesach Har Bayis, which was merely 20 ames in height. And he wouldn't be able to see the actual Pesach HaHeichel when he's peering through the 20 amma entranceway to the Har Bayis. So we're going to work it out soon how it worked that way. But that's, in a nutshell, the concern here. He has to have direct view from where he's standing all the way to the Pesach HaHeichel. And since he's looking through a Pesach, which is merely 20 amas in height, but the Har Bayis and the Beis HaMikdash, the terrain gradually rises, until once you got to the Heichel, you've already risen more than 20 amma, which puts you out of sight. It already rose beyond the 20 amma Pesach. So looking through that Pesach, even at the uppermost portion of that Pesach, you no longer can notice the Heichel, which is beyond reach. Now the Mishnah will explain exactly how it worked and why it was considered out of sight. And to accommodate that, the solution was that the wall the Mizrach wall, the first wall that he's going to notice, needed to be cut down a bit. So although the Pesach was 20 amos in height, but the building material above it was shortened. So unlike the other walls which were very tall, this was shortened because he'll have to look above it. He'll have to get a bird's eye view above that wall to notice the Pesach Heichel far away. Now he couldn't notice it through the entranceway, which was merely 20 amos high, and the Heichel was beyond 20 amos from the Har Bayis level. The only way to notice the Heichel would be to look over that wall. So apparently that wall was short to allow for that. And that's what the Mishnah here is trying to point out. All walls were tall except for the Kaisel Mizrachi of the Har Bayis, to allow the Kohen to have a view over that wall all the way directly to the Heichel. Continues the Gemara on the second wide line. We're going to figure out why he couldn't see the Heichel. And also, we're going to show that this concern presented itself only according to Rabbi Lezer and Yaakov Shita, in which case we're going to prove that Maseches Midas, and this Mishnah here, which presented it as a problem, apparently is following Rabbi Lezer and Yaakov. And that supports our contention that Midas was authored by Rabbi Lezer and Yaakov. Says the Gemara, Utnan kol hapsachim shayusham, all the entranceways in the Har Bayis, Beis Hamikdash, goiven esrim amma, roichben esrim amas were 20 amas high. We're talking about the space of the entranceway. The gap was 20 high, v'roichben esrim amas, and 10 wide. So we assume that the Pesach to the Har Bayis, to the Kaisel Mizrachi of Har Bayis, was also featured a 20 amma high Pesach. And we're going to point out how it wasn't sufficient to enable the Kohen an unobstructed view of the Pesach HaHeichel. Utnan lifnim mimenu sorik. So we have the first wall, the outermost wall of the Har Bayis, the Mizrach wall, and lifnim mimenu, behind it, beyond it, towards the Beis Hamikdash, was sorig, some sort of lattice material, some sort of lattice mechitza. Utnan, and we learned lifnim mimenu, and beyond that, hachel, eser amas. There was this area called chel, 10 amas wide, and there were some steps. Because remember, the Har Bayis would gradually rise. In order to accommodate for that rising terrain, they would make steps. So how many steps were there between the chel and the next step, and the next level, the Ezras Nashim? There were 12 steps. Rum malachatzi amma. Each step had a height of a half amma. Vishilcha chatzi amma. The landing, it had a half amma depth. 12 steps, with each step being a half amma in height, gives you a discrepancy in height of 6 ammas. So you rose 6 ammas, going from the chel to the Ezras Nashim. Ezras Nashim was 6 amas higher than the chel, 6 amas higher than the Har Bayis level. Okay, so now you're 6 amas higher. Let's move on. Tesvav Malis were 15 steps. Oilos Mitoicha were from the Ezras Nashim to Ezras Yisrael. Hayordes from Ezras Yisrael, Ezras Nashim, which they would use to go down from the Ezras Yisrael to Ezras Nashim. How large steps were these? Rum malachatzi amma, v'shilcha chatzi amma. Again, each one was a half amma high and had a depth of a half amma. So now we added another 15 steps, each one being a half amma in height, which gives you a total of 7.5 ammas for all 15 steps. That was the height difference between the two levels. The lower level, Ezras Nashim, and the higher level, Ezras Yisrael. So add that to the 6 ammas that we already accounted for. Right, there were 12 steps and now 15 steps. 12 steps give you 6 ammas in height. 15 steps give you 7.5. For a total of 13.5. So now the terrain has already risen 13.5 ammas above the Har Bayis level. We're not done. Utnan bein ha'ulam v'lamizbeach ha'beis amma. Let's move on through the Azara all the way to the Mizbeach. Between the Mizbeach and the Ulam was 22 ammas. And there were some more steps. There were 12 steps. Again, rum malachatzi amma, each step being a half amma in height, v'shilchatzi amma, and a half amma in depth. 12 more steps. each one being a half amma in height, gives you a total of 6 ammas. Add that to the 13 and a half already accounted for a total of 19 and a half. And now you're standing by the Pesach HaHeichel. So it's still within reach. It's only risen 19 and a half ammas. And the Pesach of Har Bayis was 20 ammas in height. So technically at this point you can still see. You have a small window of vision. The uppermost portion of that Pesach allows you direct view of the Pesach HaHeichel. But we're not done. Utanan, Rabbi Yehuda ben Yaakov Omer. His shita is, there was another height discrepancy. There was some step in the Azara. An amma height. And there was some sort of stage on that step. In this duchan, in this stage, there were 3 steps, each one being a half amma in height. So according to Rabbi Yehuda ben Yaakov, we just added another total of 2.5 amma in height discrepancy. So push the Heichel up even more. If until this point the Heichel was merely 19.5 amma higher than the Har Bayis, we just added another 2.5 to the total, leaving the Heichel at 22 ammas higher than the Har Bayis, which certainly puts it beyond his reach. This fellow looking through the Pesach Har Bayis, which was merely 20 ammas high, could not conceivably notice the Pesach Heichel, which was situated above that level. It was 22 ammas higher than the Har Bayis ground level. Now we understand why the Mishnah tells us that apparently the Pesach, the kaisel, the wall of the Mizrach Har Bayis, which featured that Pesach, through which the Kohen had to look, could not have been built very tall. The wall material above the Pesach had to be trimmed down because he had to peer above that wall, a bird's eye view above that wall all the way to the Heichel. He couldn't notice the Heichel through the wall, through the Pesach, because it was too short. So now we're proving our point. It makes sense if you'll say the Mishnah Midas is following Rabbi Yehuda Yaakov. The Mishnah Midas would tell us that the eastern wall was trimmed down to allow him to view above it, to peer over it. Because, according to Rabbi Yehuda Yaakov, otherwise he couldn't notice the Pesach, which was obstructed. Because if he looks through the Pesach of the Har Bayis wall, the Pesach Heichel has been blocked and obstructed. So according to Rabbi Yehuda Yaakov, the only way for him to notice the Pesach Heichel was if the eastern wall, the Har Bayis, was short, which allowed him to view over it and get a direct view of the Heichel. Why? So he's standing on the Mizrach side, on Har Zes, looking over to the Beis HaMikdash. If he looks through the Pesach, that 20 amma Pesach right next to him, on the easternmost wall of the Har Bayis, and he tries to find the Heichel, he won't find it, because it's gradually rising on him. Right? We have the first area, which was the Chel, then we have those 12 steps, each one being a half a amma high. That gives you a height discrepancy of 6 ammas in total between the Chel and the next level, the Ezus Nashim. Proceed further. You have 15 steps between there and the Ezus Israel, each step being a half amma high. So that gives you another 7.5 amma gap, for a total of 13.5. Between the Ezus Israel and the Duchan, you have to add another 2.5 amma height level difference. And then you proceed up to the Heichel. You have another 12 steps there, each one being a half amma high, for a total of 12 steps, which is 6 ammas height difference. Now the Heichel's level is 22 ammas beyond the Har Bayis' level, which puts it beyond his reach. He can't notice it if he looks through the Pesach Har Bayis, which is merely 20 ammas high. Apparently, says the Mishnah, that Pesach Har Bayis, that wall, had a short wall. The wall material above the Pesach was shortened to allow him to peer above that wall. And now he can look straight towards the Pesach HaHeichel while he's doing the Hazah Sadam. This works according to Rabbi Yaakov. The height discrepancy was so significant, which did not allow unobstructed view unless he would take a look above the Kaisel Harabais. Eloi Amis Rabbanon. However, if we're going to follow Shittas Rabbanon here, then this would never have been a problem in the first place. If that Mishnah telling us that the eastern wall of the Harabais was short to accommodate the Kohen is Shittas Rabbanon, why was that necessary? He could simply look through the Pesach, which was 20 amas high, look through the Chel, and of course, as Rashi mentioned, all the entranceways, meaning from the Chel to the Ezras Nashim, from the Ezras Nashim to the Ezras Yisrael, they're all lined up. So you can look straight through the doorways. And even though the Harabais and the Beis Hamikdash rises somewhat, but let's go through it, and we'll see that there is still one window of vision which allows a direct view from the entranceway to the Harabais all the way to the Heichel. So he looks through the entrance to the Chel, which rises 6 amas to get to the Ezras Nashim. Then we rise another 7.5 to get to Ezras Yisrael. That takes us to the steps leading to the Heichel, where we have a gradual incline of another 6 amas. That places the Pesach HaHeichel, the ground level of the Heichel, at a point of 19.5 amma elevation from the Harabais, which you can still notice technically. If he looks through the uppermost point of the Pesach Harabais, which was 20 ammas high, that last half amma, the uppermost last half amma of that Pesach, allows him direct view, unobstructed view of the Pesach HaHeichel. So the Mishnah, which tells us that there was a concern and the Pesach Harabais had to be short, the Harabais will have to be shortened to allow, to accommodate for the Kohen to see Pesach Harabais, cannot be following Shittas Rabbanon. Says more again, Eli Amos Rabbanon, because we're following Rabbanon, Ha'ika Palgad Am, so we still have a half amma, the uppermost half amma of that doorway, the Meschazile Pisal Gabe, to which you can see the Pesach HaHeichel. Elo Lav Shmami. No, this proves our point. Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakovi, the Mishnah in Midos is in line with the Rezer and Yaakov. He is the Stam Tana of Mesachas Midos. In accordance with our chat earlier, that gives us a teretz that we were looking for. Where was the Lishkas Atlaim? In Mesachas Talmud we find it in one corner, Mesachas Midos in another corner. Mesachas Midos is following a different shita, Rabbi Lezer ben Yaakov. Continues the Gemara. Rav Ada bar Rabbi Omar, Hamani Rabbi Yehudi. He says I have a different approach to this Mishnah Midas, which maintains that his view would be obstructed, if not for the fact that the Kaisel Mizrachi was shortened. It's following Shittas Rabbi Yehuda, who tells us that the Mizbeach was right in the middle of the Azar, in which case it obstructed his view. And the only way for him to notice the Pesach Heichel would be to look above the Harabais wall, which gave him direct view of the Heichel. Hamari Rabbi Yehudi, the San Rabbi Yehuda Omer, HaMizbeach memutza v'oimed, be'emtza Azara. The Mizbeach was placed squarely in the center of the Azara. Ushloishim ushtayim amos hoyle. We know the Mizbeach was 32 amos wide. Eser amos connected to Pesach shel Heichel. Now the Heichel was also 32 amos wide. We had a wall on either side, and the actual Heichel itself, the gap, the space of the interior was 20 amos wide. But then the wall on each side was 6 amos wide. So we have 20 the interior, 6 on either side, accommodating for the wall, a total of 32. The Mizbeach, which was positioned directly opposite the Heichel, was perfectly in line. Eser amos connected Pesach shel Heichel. The middle 10 amos of the Mizbeach was directly opposite the Pesach of Heichel. The Pesach of the Heichel was 10 amos wide, which led into the Heichel, which was 20 amos wide. So the Pesach of the Heichel, which was the middle of the Heichel, was directly opposite the middle 10 amos of the Mizbeach. And now we have 22 remaining. Right? The Mizbeach was 32 amos wide. The middle 10 amos were directly opposite the Pesach of the Heichel. Yud Aleph Amma L'Tzafon, Yud Aleph Amma L'Darim. On either side of the middle 10 Amos of the Mizbeach, you had another 11. 11 on either side, plus the 10 in the middle, for a total of 32, which were exactly opposite the Heichel. Nimtza Mizbeach Mechuvan Keneged Heichel Geisolav. Turns out the Mizbeach was positioned directly opposite the Heichel and the walls of the Heichel. 32 corresponding to 32. That was Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. In which case, says the Gemara, now we understand why the Kohen standing on Har Zeisin cannot notice the Heichal through the doorway, through the entranceway of the Har HaBayis. Why? Because the Mizbeach was blocking his view. Mizbeach was directly opposite the Pesach HaHeichal. That's what the Mishnah Midas meant. In order to ensure the Kohen's unobstructed vision, he had to have a short wall on the Mizrach Har HaBayis, so you can peer above it over to the Heichal. Says the Gemara, that won't work. You cannot suggest that Mesechas Midos will follow Rabbi Yehuda, that the Mizbeach was situated in the center of the Azar, right in front of the Heichal. It doesn't work like that. Take a look at the Mishnah in Midas, which describes the layout of the Azar. If you suggest that Midas is following Rabbi Yehuda, Mizbeach b'emtza Azar mishkachas lei? Since when do we find the Mizbeach being in the middle of the Azar? Let's take a look at the other Mishnah in Midas. Atnan. Kol ha'azara hoysa oirech meya u'shmonim v'sheva. The dimensions, the total dimension of the Azara were as follows. The oirech, meaning the length going from east to west, was meya u'shmonim v'sheva, 187 am. Al roichav meya u'shleishim v'chamesh. And it had a width, meaning going from Tzafon to Darim, a width of 135 am. So it's 187 by 135. Let's break it down. Min ha-mizrach l'marav, meya u'shmonim v'sheva. Let's start from Mizrach and proceed to Marav, and we'll see how we get to 187 am. First we begin with Mokim D'risas Ragli Yisrael, which was Yud Aleph am. First portion of the Azara was where the Yisrael would come to take care of the Karbanis. That stretched for 11 amos. The next part was Mokim D'risas Ragli Kehanim, Yud Aleph am. The next 11 am accommodated the Kehanim. Then we have the Mizbeach itself, which was Shloishim Ushtayim, 32 amos. Then Bein Ulam L'Mizbeach, so between the Mizbeach and the next section, which was the Ulam, we have Esim Rishtayim, 22. V'Heichel, the actual structure of the Heichel itself, was 100, Kuf Amma, leaving you with 11. Yud Aleph Amma, Achorei Beis HaKapiros. That was behind the Kodesh HaKadoshim, which is called Beis HaKapiros. Between the Kodesh HaKadoshim's wall and the Har HaBayis wall, it was 11 amos, a total of 187. Now let's go from Darim to Tzafon, the width of the Azar. Menador or Mitzafin Meya Ushleishim Chamesh, for a total of 135. How is that? Let's break it down. Hakevesh v'Mizbeach. Let's begin from Darim and proceed to Tzafon. The first thing you'll encounter is the ramp and the Mizbeach. Shishim Ushtayim, 62. Now, although the Kevesh itself was 32 and the Mizbeach was 62, but remember there was an overlapping portion as well, because true the Kevesh was 32, but the Mizbeach was a bit tucked under the Kevesh, at least the lower portion of the Mizbeach, which was the Yisoid and the Soiviv, they were protruding from the Mizbeach, and they were tucked under the Kevesh. The Kevesh would rise right above that. So 2 amis of the Mizbeach were actually embedded in the Kevesh. So deduct 2 from the total. It was 32, deduct 2 for a total of 62. Let's proceed. Min ha-Mizbeach u'letabois. Ches amis. There were these rings through which they would place the animal, the neck of the animal, to make it for an easy shechita. Between the Mizbeach and those tabois, we had a space, some breathing room, ches amis. So now we have a total of 70, 62 plus 8. Mokim ha-tabois, esrim ba'arba. The actual space of the tabois was 24 amis. This gets up to a total of 94. Min ha-tabois l'shulchanis arba. The space between the rings and those tables upon which they would rinse the karbonis, that took up 4 amis. Now we have a total of 98. Min ha-shulchanis l'nanasin. Between the shulchanis and these posts, which had hooks upon which they would hang from which they would hang the karbonis while they do the hefshit, the flaying of the skin. So the space between the shulchanis l'nanasin were 4 amis. Gives us a total of 102. Min hananosin l'kois la'azara ches. The space between these posts and the tzafon wall of the azara was 8 amis, ches amis. Now Rashi points out that the shulchanos themselves also took up 4 amis. So really we're holding at 114. Out of a total of 135. We have 20 amas left over, unaccounted for. What do you do with the remaining 21 amas? We still have 2 areas which are not accounted for. Bein hakeresh v'lakaisel u'makom hananosin. We didn't discuss how much space the actual posts took up, and also we didn't leave some room between the ramp and the wall. There must have been some room there to access the ramp properly. So we assume that the remaining 21 amis are split evenly between these 2 locations. So you had 21 amma split into 2, giving you 10.5 amma between the Durham wall and the Kevish, another 10.5 for the Makom Hananas. So now we reached 135. Now, if you maintain that Mesechas Midas is in line with Rabbi Yehuda, who says the Mizbeach was situated right in the middle of the Azara, right in front of the Heichal, Mizbeach be'emtza Azara mishkachas lei. How do you see the Mizbeach being in the middle of the Azara? The way the Tana here described the configuration of the Azara, it wasn't in the middle. Haruba the Mizbeach b'darim kai. Actually, most of the Mizbeach was sitting in Darim. It was not right in the middle of the Azara, not right in front of the Heichal. It wasn't really blocking the Heichal. In which case, you can't say that this is the thing that presented the concern for the Kohen standing on Har Zaysim. He couldn't look through, he couldn't see the Heichal through the entranceway to the Har Bayis because he was being blocked by the Mizbeach, which was positioned right in front of the Heichal, in line with Rabbi Yehuda's Shita. Mesechas Midas apparently does not follow that Shita. As we just saw, according to the way the Tana describes things, Rav of the Mizbeach was actually in Durham and was not blocking the Kohen's view. Why is that? How do we see that most of the Mizbeach was B'tzafin? Let's go over it again. We have the Roichav Azara. We have a bird's eye view here. Let's start from Durham and proceed to Tzafin. Let's start on the left. We have the 10.5 gap between the wall and the Mizbeach V'kevish. We have the Mizbeach V'kevish encompassing 62 am. Then we have the 8 between the Mizbeach and the Tabois. We have 24 for the Tabois. We have another 4 between the Tabois and Shulchanos. We have 4 for the Shulchanos. We have 4 between the Shulchanos and the Nanosin. And we have 4 for the actual Nanosin. Actually, we have 10.5 for the Nanosin. And between the Nanosin and the Tzafin wall of the Azar, we have 8. That's the way the Gemara presented and explained this mission. Now, if we take the total Roichav of Azara, which was 135, and you draw an imaginary line going right through it, right in the middle, splitting into 2, leaving 67.5 on either side. So that's the halfway point of the Azara, which corresponded to the halfway point, the midpoint in the Pesach HaHeichel. Pesach HaHeichel was beyond the Azara and was 10 amas wide. 5 of that Pesach was on Tzafin, 5 on Durham. Now, where was Mizbeach situated? It was mostly in Durham side. Now, really, there was 5. There were 5 amas of that Mizbeach which spilled over into the Tzafin side, which really seemed to go ahead and block. It seems that they blocked the Pesach HaHeichel entirely. Why? Let's start again on the left, on Durham. 10.5 space between the wall and the Kevish. Add another 62 for the Kevish and the Mizbeach, for a total of 72.5. Now, if it was only 67.5 to the halfway point of the Azara, in which case it turns out that the Mizbeach spilled over 5 amos into the other side, into Tzafin, which seem to obstruct the Pesach HaHeichel entirely. Pesach Heichel also only had 5 on Darim and 5 on Tzafin. Mizbeach covered that all, blocked it all. So what does the Gemara mean? That according to this Mishnah, since the Mizbeach was mostly B'darim, it wouldn't pose a concern. It wouldn't block the Pesach Heichel. Wouldn't obstruct the Kohen's view when he was looking from Har HaBayis to the Heichel. So Rashi says, because although technically we say the Mizbeach was 5 Amma into the other side of the Azara, let's remember, the bottom of the Mizbeach protruded. So we had some steps there. We pull back an Amma for the base, for the side, then we go up a couple of Ammas. Then we pull back another Amma for the side, that was the walkway. So really, the bottom part of the Mizbeach wasn't solid. There were some steps, and it pulled back. So when we say the Mizbeach was 5 Amma into the other side, into Tzafin, we mean the bottom part of the Mizbeach. The bottom surface, yeah. But then it gradually pulled back and narrowed as it went up. So it narrowed 2 Ammas. One for the surface of the Yesod, and one for the surface of the Soviv. In which case, although 3 out of those 5 was solid Mizbeach material, which blocked the Heichel, but on the upper right corner of that Mizbeach, we had an empty space, air space. And that served as a window, so to speak, through which the Kohen could peer through and see the Pesach HaHeichel. Those 2 Ammas were unobstructed. So that's the Gemara's response. You cannot say the reason why the Kohen couldn't see the Pesach HaHeichel was because the Mizbeach was square in the middle of the Azara, like Rabbi Yehuda. The Mishnah here clearly does not hold on to Rabbi Yehuda, that the Mizbeach was situated in the middle of the Azara. It was mostly to the left. It was mostly to the Darim of the Azara. Yeah, true, there was a little bit spillover. 5 Ammas, which reached over to the Tzafin side, which seemed to block the Pesach HaHeichel, but it's not so, because really, the upper part of that section, that 5 Amma section, was not solid material. The upper right corner was empty, in which case you could look right through it and see the Heichel. Says the Gemara, apparently your approach is incorrect. Apparently the Mishnah Midas is not following Rabbi Yehuda. It wasn't the Mizbeach which blocked view. Apparently it's Rabbi Yaakov. Shma Mina. The problem wasn't the Mizbeach blocking. Rather, the problem was because we're following Rabbi Yaakov, who told us that there was that extra stage built in the Azara for a total of 2.5 Ammas in height, which resulted in the Heichel being lifted an additional 2.5 Ammas above the Har HaBayis level. As we mentioned before, we have a total. If you rise from the Har HaBayis all the way to the Heichel, we have a total of a 22 Amma rise, which puts him beyond view. He couldn't conceivably notice the Pesach Heichel. He's merely peering through the entranceway to the Har HaBayis, which was just 20 Ammas in height. The concern wasn't the Mizbeach, because we're not following that sheet. That Mizbeach was right in the middle of the Azar, blocking the Heichel. It was off to the side. The concern rather was because of the Duchan, which blocked his view. Okay, time for Riv Chazara. We began with a stira. Mishnah and Tamid tells us that Lishkas Atlaim was in the Safan Marav corner of the large Lishkas Beis HaMoiked. Mishnah Midas tells us it was in Darim Marav. The Gemara responds by saying Mishnah Midas reflects Shita's Rabbi Yaakov. It's a different Shita and it's a different location. How do we know that he's the author of Maseches Midas? Because when we describe the various functions of the rooms in the Ezras Nashim, we find an interesting expression. Now Mishnah. Omer Rabbi Yaakov, I forgot what he used to serve. Apparently he is the Man Omer of Maseches Midas. In fact, we have another right that he's the Man Omer. Mishnah tells us the Kaisel Mizrach of the Har HaBayis was shortened to allow the Kohen standing on Har Zeisim to look over that wall and notice the Pesach Heichel when he does the Hazah. Because if not for that accommodation, he would not notice the Pesach Heichel through the 20 Amma high entranceway. And the reason for that is because there was an additional step in the Azara which lifted the Heichel beyond reach beyond 20 amas. Because according to Rabbanan, that wouldn't be a concern if there was no additional step in the Azara. Although, true, the terrain would rise. We had lots of steps between the Harabayis and the Heichel, but it only reached a total of 19.5 amma in height discrepancy, in which case it still placed the Pesach Heichel within eyesight of the Pesach Harabayis, which was 20 amas higher. Whereas according to Blaise Ben Yaakov, since we added that extra step, it placed the Heichel 2.5 amas higher, in which case it was beyond the 20 amma reach of the Pesach Harabayis. Apparently he had to look over that wall. That's why I had to make a shorter wall to enable the Kohen an unobstructed view of the Pesach Heichel when he was doing the Hazah of the Parah Adumah. Hatzlacha to you and Kult.